Our second story out front, explosive accusations in Florida. In a scathing Palm Beach Post article, the state's former Republican chairman, Jim Greer, claims that his party passed a law that was designed to squelch Democratic turnout and give Florida to Mitt Romney. All right, now let me just explain here. The law mainly cut down on the number of early voting days and made it harder for voters who had moved to actually cast ballots. Now, the Republican Party of Florida has responded, and they tell out front, I want to quote them here, Jim Greer's claims are false and details keep changing. Out front, Roland Martin, CNN contributor, and Noelle, Nikpour, Republican strategist and columnist for the Sun Sentinel. Great to have both of you. Roland, let me start with you, though. These accusations come from Jim Greer, as we said, former boss of the party. Right. He is accused of stealing money from the party. They also, though, these same accusations or similar ones come from Charlie Crist, who abandoned the party to run as an independent and now is rumored to be about to run for governor as a Democrat. So all that context is important. Are these claims credible, though?
For 2 years, I've been blasting these efforts in Florida as outright voter suppression, and it is no shock to me that you're actually hearing this. It goes beyond just shortening early voting days. Remember, they got rid of voting on Sunday. Now, in a country where you want more people voting, why would you take away a day when people would say, hey, no need for me to go to vote polls on Tuesday. I can actually vote on that particular Sunday.
Well, I don't know why we vote on a Tuesday. Otherwise,
many of us believe they were targeting those churches that were voting en masse as well. We saw this in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Texas. And I've said point blank, and it's on CNN.com, I wrote a piece. The Republicans helped turnout because they ticked off a lot of black voters, Hispanic voters, young voters, and senior citizens by trying to suppress the vote. It was an idiotic thing to do, and they paid the price for it.
Noelle, let me ask you a question here, because we're talking about Florida, but I just wanted to play what now is an infamous soundbite from the majority leader in the Pennsylvania State Congress. Mike Turzai is his name. I'm sure you're probably familiar with this, but this was a direct voter ID law, and here's what he had to say.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
All right. Obviously, a soundbite. I'm sure that he probably regrets saying, but I mean, that was what he thought. Right. So do you admit there are some bad apples in the party, that there are Republicans who do think that these laws will squelch Democratic turnout?
As within any party, you're going to have fraud. You're going to have people that, are bad apples, like you said. But you've got to admit, these allegations that came up saying that, that we suppressed, votes are coming from an ex-governor who was a Republican, switched over, independent, is going to run as a Democrat against Rick Scott, who implemented this law. And you've got, a guy that's a convicted felon stealing money that's basically going to say anything. There was nobody that sat in any meeting and said that we're trying to suppress minorities and blacks from voting. They did this to save money for the states, for Florida.
Not buying it 1 second, because when you look at what took place in Florida and other states, they can't even explain, okay, because the first thing it was, well, I heard save money. Then I heard, well, it also was to allow the people who work the polls opportunity to take a rest in terms of voting on weekends and on Sundays. It all made no sense whatsoever. And so it was a targeted effort that was replicated in many other states across the country because they were following the lead of Florida. And it backfired. On election night, even after we called the election for President Obama, there were people who were standing in the rain in Florida who were saying, I'm not leaving this line, hold the line, because we're going to make sure our vote was cast. I'm telling you, Erin, the Obama campaign was extremely worried about voter turnout. A lot of people, they were so ticked off because of voter suppression. That's what fired them up and it pushed them over the edge.
We have had so much voter fraud. Do you not remember when Acorn registered voters with all this voter fraud? We had Mickey Mouse.
They were caught.
Well, they were caught, but this is going to save states money. Not only that, Florida is going to save them money, and that's why Rick Scott did this.
But here's what you brought up. You said
it's called H.R. 1335.
You said voter fraud. For instance, the guy from Pennsylvania, when they had the lawsuit in court, they filed documents. The Attorney General said, we have no evidence of voter fraud. Even if we have the voter ID, it will not even stop a potential voter fraud. So they claim voter fraud, but they don't have any evidence of it. And the Acorn piece, they were caught by the existing system. So if they were caught, how can they say voter fraud?
But does Noelle have a point that there is saving money? I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm certainly not going to sit here and defend it. I'm just saying, does she have a point?
Look, I totally get we talk about saving money, but if there is one thing we should be paying for, is to have more citizens out there actually voting, especially in the presidential election, when it's every 4 years. Part of the problem here is you have all of these different state rules as opposed to a federal standard when it comes to these various elections. Well, Florida was doing, they can try all they want to, but that was clear effort to suppress the vote, and it backfired. Romney didn't even win the state.
Look, it's easy to pin this on the GOP because the GOP has got a reputation of being like that we're a country club. We're like an elitist organization. Because,
no, I'm basing it upon the facts.
But here's the deal. So go ahead and say that the GOP, that the Florida GOP, that's their mission. It's not, and it's easy to pin that on us when that's what you're saying.
I have asked Republicans across the country, give me one example of trying to expand the right to vote or access to the ballot across the country. Give me one example. I've yet to hear them give me one example.
Well, why is saving money? Why is saving money? What does that have to do with suppressing black voters or minority voters by saving money? That's for everybody. Saving the money for the state, that's for everyone.
But if you're talking about an election where you want more people voting, then you can say, we know it's every 4 years. You set money aside.
What about the third party voting? When you go to a mall or you go to somewhere that's not a specific polling place to register, and it takes now with Rick Scott, what the governor did, it takes 48 hours. As before, you could sit on these papers for a very long time.
And that particular law calls illegal women voters to not even register people in the state and rock to vote, and that also was an effort again to.
It was very biased.
Okay, all right. Wow, rock to vote is biased. Legal women voters, are they biased? Okay, just checking.
I'm sure this conversation will continue when you all leave the set. All right, thanks to both.